Kapai.
To start,
Yeah, you okay, Perry? Morena koutou, no mai hara mai ki te tare o te kaunihira o rohe o Waikato. Perry, can I ask you to open our hui, please, with a karakia? That's because you're late. I could have got you to sing a song instead. Or you could do both. So today we're going to, we have an agenda pack that takes us to about 12 items. Evelyn and I have decided that we will split it evenly. She'll do the evens and I'll do the odds. So, and that's how we'll run the day. Okay, so next part, yours, mate.
Kia ora, thank you. Oh, thank you. Red normally means stop. And so we just take a little bit of time to catch up to see how everyone's doing. So Stu, how's everything with you and your whānau?
No, things are all good. Just one of those things. But no, farm's going well. Things are right, which is so no, going well, thank you.
Great, and all the best for the elections. Right.
Isn't it good to start?
Well, I'll just work our way around. But Kataraina.
Yeah, you're right. Like elections are on. I'm lucky enough myself and Tipper as councillors for the Maori ward of Waikato Regional Council have made it back unopposed. So I do feel for those who have to go through campaigning, but it's really great for me. That means I can just carry on doing all of my other work that I would have had to stop to campaign. So, but all's well, whānau's well, I'm fine. Lovely to see you all.
Kia ora, Kataraina. And who's this lovely lady that we have?
Kia ora, for those that don't know me, I'm Jess. I'm one of the democracy advisors here at the Waikato Regional Council. I've been at council nearly 4 years now and just stepped over into the democracy services. So far.
Kia ora, Jess. Perry.
Kia ora anō. We'll be best to acknowledge. Pardon me, just echo. Just acknowledge Kataraina as a, I should say, a whānau from Hororo, but also to acknowledge my daughter. She won't be too happy about me acknowledging her, but my daughter Danielle, who also works for the Waikato Regional Council. Business as usual.
And yeah, everything's fine with me. I've just come back from a holiday somewhere nice and hot, so so I'm feeling regenerated. And I'm not standing for council again. I've done 3 terms. It was possible that I wasn't going to be staying in Taupo, so I decided not to run again and leave that up to somebody else. So yes, so that's sort of, I've got mixed feelings about that, obviously, a little bit sad and also a little bit happy about the next chapter. So yeah, just like to thank everybody because I've enjoyed this committee.
Great, thank you, Kathy, and thank you for your contribution that you've made. 3 terms. Yeah, well done. Thank you. If we could introduce the Terret team, please. Joe, I'll start with you and we'll... Morena, okay. Try to bridge it. And who do we have sitting next to you, Joe? Can't, the seat's in the road. Kia ora.
Kia ora. My name is Jack London. I'm with
Jack. Tēnā koe. Kia ora. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe te whare tūtahi ake. Tēnā koe e koro. Kapuare tā tātou i tāne. Me te hoki te hoa mahi au tō te mahime. Me tāna taku koro ki ai o pai ana kia kapātu ki ake mō ngā koro mōna. Yeah, looking for some inside gossip about our teammate here. You're a bit nervous that you're here, but it's lovely to meet you and thank you for our tira nāranga tira o iwi trust. E hoa maki koki.
Thanks to my teammate Tarek for getting me to regional council to Aotearoa. Yeah, I'm kind of heading here within the title.
I'm William. I'm a private desk and I have months in Freshwater uni.
Nā mihi kia koutou katoa. Ko Evelyn Forrest Whenua, ko Ngāti Tahu, Ngāti Whaoa te iwi, ko te Arawa River Iwi Trust, te Ropu, no Ngāti Tahu, Ngāti Whaoa hau. Kia ora. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Let's press on with the meeting.
Oh, Tipene, I'm so sorry. I didn't recognise you under that mask. I had the audacity to ask this lady here, who are those two guys at the back there? So I do apologise, Tipene. Welcome to the whare. Lovely to see you as usual. We're going to go into apologies now. We have Waikato Regional Council Chair,
Confirmation of the agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda? Do we have any changes or addition to the agenda? Anything for general business? Stu, are you okay with the?
Yep.
Thank you.
and our disclosures of interest. Is there any in here that's not recorded? If you have some that are different than what's on, please advise our democracy services going forward. But if you find there's a take coming up that you might have a conflict of interest at that time, then I'm happy for you to declare it as well, just before that particular item comes to the table. So, can I have a move and a seconder? I'm just going to pick people,
Yes.
guys. Our room is so little anyway, so you might find your names on the paper all day. But hey, so I'm going to go from Kathy and Perry at this time.
Okay, if we can move to page 2, we've got the minutes of our previous hui. Let me see who was present. Both Stu and Kathy were here, and myself. Was there anything in the minutes that you wanted to raise? Are you happy with the minutes? Are you happy with the minutes? Stu? Okay, so can I ask that the minutes are moved and seconded, please? Thank you. Happy to second, Kathy. Kia ora. Thank you. The minutes are confirmed and moved, and there are no matters arising. Did we have any matters arising out of the minutes? It's been a little while. Those minutes were taken. That was November, and that was a virtual meeting. Kapai. Thank you.
Okay, we're on page 9 now. Significant sites compliance. Is someone going to talk to that? You are. Page 9.
Kia ora tātou. So my name is Jack London. I'm a team leader with the regional consent section. So normally we prepare a significant consented sites compliance summary every 6 months that we take to the operational hui. And today being a combined co-governance and operational hui. Before you for the first time, so you might not have seen some of this reporting before. There are no recommendations to come out of it. It's an informative report. So what I'd be keen to do is accept it as read and open the floor to any questions.
Kia ora, thank you. I have a question just around the compliance. So some of the, given that we're in 2022, and excuse me if I'm reading this wrong, it just says, you know, where some of these consents are held, that the site was fully compliant the year 2021. Does that mean it's not compliant at the moment?
No. So most of these are reported for 2021. You might see one on there for 22, which is the Mercury hydropower. And that's simply the way that our auditing is done with those reports. So those sites report back to us annually. normally around the end of August, September and October. So we don't have a full audit that covers that 21-22 period for a lot of these sites until normally the next couple of weeks. So the timing of this meeting just comes prior to that. We can look at the, so we have included any current actions that have been taken through the year. So any incidents, any major non-compliance that has come up with discharges or any enforcement action. For these sites, there hasn't been any in the 21-22 year. But what we can do is once we've run through those, received the annual reports from the site and completed our audit for that year, we can update this report and pass it around the committee if we need to. Otherwise, it would go to our next 6-monthly meeting.
Oh, thank you. So these are, yeah, I have to apologise. I haven't had time to thoroughly
okay.
read the board pack, unfortunately, and perhaps I'll capture it in the minutes later on. But I did have a discussion regarding the receipt of the board pack and needing a lot more time than we're given to be able to read them.
Yeah, of course. So for these sites, we've been generally fully compliant with these sites. Any compliance issues that have been identified have been low risk in nature, mainly around reporting and submission timeframes. The one probably to note that's the exception to that is the Arawa Dairy Factory, which is having some issues with phosphate concentrations within the soil, which they're addressing through some soil remedial work. And we'll be able to provide another update on that once we've gone through their annual reporting.
Okay, thank you.
Jack, I have a quick question. Your headings has got actions taken to address non-compliance, opportunity for review in the next 9 months, and then expiry. So some of these expiry dates are so way beyond your lifetime. And, you know, how on earth and what on earth is in place to ensure that the expiry dates don't have any problems going up to there. Also, I want to know, how does those expiry dates and, of course, the opportunity for review in 9 months deal with climate change around some of these areas? Because, you know, geothermal, hydroelectricity, you don't know, not you personally, but nobody knows exactly what's going to be there in some of these years of expiry dates. So I worry about the length of expiry dates that are there. I wonder whether the opportunity to review in a 9 months is only about whether the state of it is okay, or whether we should be looking at shortening the expiry dates.
Yeah,
thoughts?
so the opportunity to shorten the expiry date isn't there, but the review period does allow us to change the conditions of those consents within that time frame. Normally at specific intervals, it could be yearly, biannual, or every 3 years are the normal review periods, and those allow us to take into account exceptional circumstances like changing climate that may be substantially affecting those consents and their ability to comply with that. Some of those timeframes, you know, going out to 2040, nearly 2050, some of them, that's a very long time frame. And a lot of those consents were granted, you know, a decade or so more ago. It would be unlikely that many consents granted now would have that kind of time frame. 30 years would be quite a long time frame for it to be granted now, because of that recognition of the changes that occur, both climate, but also around social, cultural expectations about what's acceptable in a consent.
That's great, because I think as the review comes around, it's important that whoever's sitting on that review table from WRC and Carrot or whomever has also got a report on climate change going forward, because there's just too much happening around there. Kathy?
Yeah, I agree with you, Katarina, about the length of the consents that they do need to be looked at again. I just had a couple of questions. One of them was the Tore Patutahi wetland had some damage done to it when there was an aerial spraying operation there, and we've talked about it at this committee. once before. I'm just wondering, are you aware of those kinds of things? I mean, I look at how it says in there that that the site operates at full compliance, etc. I just wonder. I'm assuming it was one of the conditions of their consent that they do work within that wetland. Do we keep records of those kinds of things to make sure those things don't happen again?
Yeah, so any incidents or instances of non-compliance that we become aware of, either through our incident response team and the pollution complaints, or directly through our on-site monitoring or self-reporting, those are all recorded in our audits and actions, and they become a focus for the next few years to make sure that it's not repeated.
Oh, that's good. Okay, that's reassuring. And also, just so I understand how it all works, so for instance, with the Mercury Energy, next review period is in April to October 2023. If people have things that they want to raise before that period and they send them through to you, do they get collected to look at throughout that period, or would they have to actually hold off on sending you information until April 2023?
No, people don't generally hold off.
No, I didn't imagine.
They fire it through,
Yeah.
and that's something that we collate and we keep on file. When that review period comes up, if any of that kind of meets that threshold for a significant change or significant compliance with those consents that would almost trigger a review, then that would all be taken in. So any concerns with any of these sites and any that aren't on here as well, we welcome all that feedback. A lot of that can be addressed directly with the consent owner without the need for a formal review.
Do we actually do anything to alert members of the public to the fact that that's coming up? That this review period is coming up, or does it just happen?
Yeah, it just happens. So it's an opportunity for review. So it's not every 3 years we would formally review the consent. It's by exception. So that opportunity is there to address things that are not working.
Okay.
With that consent.
Thank you.
And where it says April, October, that's the period that WRC has to initiate it. So we can do it any time within that period if we're determined to do it.
Thank you.
Just one question, please. And that was on the Frontiera Dairy Factory Repro. The site was generally compliant. To me, generally, they were compliant or they weren't compliant. So it's either they are or they're not. And according to this, they're not compliant. While the issue may be minor in whatever sense it is, it's still an issue. So for me, I'd actually say that they weren't compliant and what they were actually trying to achieve to make sure that they are compliant coming through, because again, their consents are through to expire in 2027.
Yeah, no, definitely. So when we talk about a site, they may have 10 consents for that dairy factory in Arawa, or you look at some of the Wairaki geothermal plants, and that can have hundreds of consents, which they may be compliant with the majority of those, and it may be one or two of the major ones that, or minor ones that they're non-compliant. So generally compliant was just the terminology I use. If it's preferable for the committee for me to change that wording around and highlight non-compliance where there is and detail exactly what it's been, we're more than happy to do that. We want this report to be as useful and highlight the information that you need to see and want to see. Open to any kind of feedback on changing what we actually report on. And
Thank you. I'm sorry, through the chair. It was, if you're using the word generally, well, to me, that's like a casual look at how things are going with something as important as this, and shouldn't really have that word, I believe, sitting in there. So if they're not compliant, they're not compliant, and how are they going to fix it?
Yeah, so we can definitely address that. Thank you for the feedback. I will add that that was a full audit that we went through that site, so assessing every consent that they hold, and they've got specific actions with time in order to meet that level of compliance from them. And if that's not met within those timeframes, then we will be looking at further action to make sure that they come back into compliance, especially where it affects genuine environmental like soils, phosphate concentration.
Kathy, did you have another question?
I was actually just going to reinforce that that when we started to get the in the Environmental Performance Committee, when we started to get the three waters being an item agenda that was on every single agenda, and there was a report about every single territorial authority and their consents and what were the problems with their consents, we suddenly got movement in terms of improvement because it was actually in the agenda stating which territorial authority it was and what the problems were. And I think it is useful to do that because I think they suddenly become aware that they're being scrutinised from a governance level as well. So that was just my personal opinion. I think it is useful to actually say what the areas of non-compliance are, just so that you kind of keep track of it on a regular basis, and this committee can see whether late reporting is the thing that's coming up all the time, for instance. So that was just my opinion.
Questions. Just around community engagement. So especially the sites with long-term consents. Is that part of their consent requirements to engage with the community?
In general, for site-sized like this, I would say yes. I'm not 100% familiar with these, so Fonterra do. The geothermal ones have an aspect of that in there, so it's not just at review periods that they get their engagement. And a normal condition we put into these resource consents is an annual or quarterly liaison with the stakeholders that include ourselves, iwi, the community, and I would be surprised if those conditions weren't part of these resource consents, although I can't speak specifically to these ones.
Is that part of your process to collect? How does council collect feedback from the community around any concerns?
Yeah, so it's generally through those community meetings if they take place or if they're required. Otherwise, it's just on a as and when we receive information, either through complaints or feedback. And that just comes in through our customer service.
Last one for me before we say thank you, Jack, is that looking at what Evelyn has just said, when you do reviews or when Waikato Regional Council do reviews around these consenting, is there a space for someone from Tarot to be involved as well? Because I think it's important that all of these areas are within the Tarot community, and there's a difference between Tarot itself and the community. And because we're reporting back here to WRC and Tarot, I wonder if there's space for us to look at how do we involve Tarot in some of the reviews that we might be doing on some of these sites, so that they have a first-hand corridor, and when you bring the take back to the table, it's united between both Tarot and us. Because what this is doing, and all reports, it's totally council, and sometimes I don't agree that we're missing the main partner out, and in our JMAs, our main partners is whoever that other iwi is. So if we've got reviews or whatever going on within the JMAs, and while I'm still a councillor, I really like to see the input of the iwi into whatever it is we're doing. So when it comes to the table, it's a joint corridor to the table. Okay.
Yeah.
Just thoughts for you to take away. Don't answer me.
Okay.
Think about it, please. So if there's no more questions for Jack, I'd like to say thank you, Jack, and I'll move your report as received, and Evelyn will second it. Okay, thank you, Jack.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so we have Anna Rose, Advancing Māori Medium in Environmental Education.
Anna Rose is online.
Ka pai.
Arawa mai. Kia ora te whānau. Kua rongo koutou?
Ai.
We're here o ngā mihi kia koutou te whānau, te wharirau. Tēnā koe ngā whānau katoa o Te Arawa River Iwi Trust, ngā mihi kia koutou. Nā mihi ki a koe Evelyn, Perry, te whānau hoki o koutou. Kia mātou whānau hoki o te kaunihira arohe o Waikato. Ko Anna Rose Solomon Banks ahau, he uri ahau no tainui waka, ngō Ngāti Parau, ngō Ngā Puhi hoki. Te puaki ana ai ngā rua wahia, ko tiranga wai tōku marae, ko taupari tōku mai ngā ko Waikato tōku awa. Kia ora whānau, ko te mihi
Tēnā koe.
tuatahi, tēnā koe whai. Ko te mihi tuatahi ki a mātou kingia kingi tūheitia. Kia mihi hoki anō ki a koutou a mātua Toby Curtis, tā Curtis, i tēnei wā mō tōnā kumiana. Ngā mihi ki a koutou te whānau rā. Aroha mai, I'd love to be in there at this present moment. I have a pakaru, kua whati tōku pipi pā tōna pukuhiwi tōna ringa hoki kua hiki mai rā ia mai tōna papa. So I'm at home, aroha mai, I'm tiakia my baby. She has broken her elbow a couple of days ago, and as much as they are teenagers, they're very painful at this moment. So nā mihi ki a koutou. With reports to, with regards to the report, Madam Chair, I take that as being read. I have a little presentation to talk to along these. So may I please share my screen? Can I do it from this end?
Yep.
Where are we? Aroha mai. And I turn my camera off too, just so you don't see my, look up my nose or what have you. Okay, are we sharing yet?
Not yet.
Aroha mai. Kua ki koutou nainau, koe ki te?
Yep. Yes.
Aye.
Ai, ka pai. So just pātai away, I'll just speak to the Kurawaiti, Kurawaita River Schools and Moana Schools whānau. So ko tēnei te kaupapa, I'm in the education team. Ko ai te kaihapai hōtaka mā tauranga. I think I have the best role in council. Aroha mai, everybody. But my mahi is to work with our rangatahi, inspiring our rangatahi in kaitiakitanga. So I work alongside all our iwi partners. As you all know, we cross all our 5 iwi and all our hapu. And so River Schools, Moana Schools, Kurawaiti, Kurawaita, was created as part of a desktop synthesis and wānanga with all our iwi around what's the most, not the most important, but what's really in front of all our iwi at the moment. Through those kōrero, through a core education report, through a report with the College of Research and Development that we commissioned, it became very apparent that why water was the main kaupapa or theme that threaded all our iwi together, starting from Waikato Te Awa, going through Tūwharetoa, through to Raukawa, through to Maniapoto, Te Arawa, through to Waikato Tainui, out to our port, out to Hauraki. Waikato Te Awa was the main tūpuna that threaded through all our iwi. We went out to our waterways and our tributing awa that go alongside and out to our harbours. So this connection to us as humans and as iwi became very apparent as a kaupapa to bring forward for our rangatahi. So starting at Tūwharetoa is Waikato Iti, and again we visited, I went to visit with Waikato Tainui, Waikato Iti, to ensure that I got the narrative right across all our iwi in terms of sharing that kaupapa with our rangatahi. So through the vision and strategy and through your iwi environmental plan, we see the connection that we have together through Waikato Te Awa and the river waterways that flow through your rohi there, and our hapu and our iwi that are connected through our partnerships. Nei o koutou, mahi o koutou, so I don't need to explain to you all how important this relationship with us is at the Regional Council. So through Te Ture Whaimana and this document here, we created the River Schools and Moana Schools. This program we're really fortunate to be led by Hotiroa Barclay Kerr, well-known tohunga rangatira around the navigation of international waterways and our riverways. So we did a trial in 2021 of the River Schools. Here's the framework. If you can imagine dropping a pebble into water and it ripples out, this is the kind of framework that we mean, because Māori have a never-ending life learning journey. Again, I'm around my 50-year age group and I'm still considered a rangatahi on my paipai at my marae. So all those relationships we have with our iwi are ongoing and forever learning. And this is what this model demonstrates, the ripple effect. Our tupuna awa at the middle with all the waterways, including Tarrett's waterways here. That's our core business. Surrounding the waterways is our legislative spaces that enable us to be kaitiaki of our waterways. Te Ture Whaimana, our iwi documents all around here. What surrounds those? We've placed our kurawaiti, kurawaita, our river schools, our young people. They wānanga once a term on the river. The awa becomes the classroom. They're not in four walls. They are on wakatete. They are learning in te reo Māori and mātauranga Māori as to how to be kaitiaki through climate change, through fauna and flora Indigenous practices. Outside that ripple are the graduates from Kura Kaupapa Māori and our internships. They carry on the journey of kaitiakitanga, and they can come into our council. We have a few internships and career pathways for our rangatahi of all our iwi partners. Surrounding them is a kahui kaitiaki, our marae and our iwi. So we have a external reference group with high experience and skills that help guide the strategic vision of the kurawaiti kurawaita. Please just jump in if you have any kōrero. Here we are at the launch in 2021 at Taupiri Marae, having Karakia. Again, mātauranga Māori is foremost in our kaitiaki environmental learning. So here are the students of the kura with Uncle Tom returning to Taupiri. The connection to Tongariro flowing right through is part of their learning. They learn the history, the hitori from all the mana whenua. They go up to the college. They learn about Raupatu and the settlement and Te Ture Whaimana. And it's quite an interesting concept for young people. They want to know what that means to them, and they understand that their tupuna before them, their grandparents, etc., their kuia and koro, were a part of this. So what does it mean for them and how do they step into it? So we have really neat conversations. One of the ways they do, here we are with the kurawaiti, we take them to the awa. Currently we have 7 kura in here. This is just two of the kura here. They learn the haka, the hitori, the waiata of wakatete. They are taught by Hoturo Barclay Kerr and his education team. And again, the classroom is the awa and their waterways. They learn about the Indigenous flora and fauna. They learn about the effects of climate change. They learn about 3 waters. They learn about how they can advance their te reo Māori or te taia hoki. Here we have the tamariki, again, learning about water safety, what the awa means, being engaged, having a sense of pride and connection as kaitiaki. We also have our river internships. Grateful to the University of Waikato. Here is one of our river interns this year, Jazz Puriri. She's doing her master's in mussel farming, and she did workshops for 100 rangatahi, year 9, 10 students on science, technology, engineering, and mātauranga Māori. they get really inspired when they see their own age group in these spaces of being scientists and environmental scientists. Again, here's Arawa Salu. She's an environmental water monitoring scientist at Waikato Regional Council. She takes our Kurawaiti students down to the awa, delivers all into Te Reo Māori, and they look at her and go, I want to be you, I want that job, and that's pretty much what we'd like our rangatahi to do. They go back and they share their learning about Kurawaiti with their marae and their kura. We currently have a partnership with Hamilton City Council around ensuring that all the taonga and all the mahi that's done with Kurawaiti rests in the hands of the iwi, of all our iwi, and the support that councils can bring is, to be honest, is helping to fund their marae or kura into this program. I find our iwi more have the mana, it's way more monetary with their support and contributions to designing the program. Here we have some of our river internships. So again, in your taiao team, in the education taiao team, if they have any river interns, Tim Manuko is one of the ones that supports that program with us, and he has committed another river Kurawaiti river intern to the program with the University of Waikato and WRA. So we're really proud to have that. Anō, last slide. Sorry, whānau, quickly, this is just with Waikato Tainui. We were on the Tirohoi, 4-day Tirohoi, and that's me trying to keep up with the young people there and learning the stories as we go along. This just ensures that our kaupapa remains pono. So, tēnā whānau, I'll just unclip that. And hoki mai. So part of the kōrero whānau is there's no recommendations particularly. The role of this program is to ensure all our iwi partners get the opportunity in 2003 to come on the Kurawaiti Kurawaita program if they are interested in joining in, or I can come kōrero to your operational team. Kei a koutou te mana.
Oh, tēnā koe, Anna. Thank you for that beautiful presentation. It very feel like we're very much in our infancy when we, compared to our aspirations are not, but compared to where we are at that stage of being able to sort of reach some of those long-term goals. Waikato Tainui are definitely there and doing it and doing it very well. So congratulations, it's an awesome program. I do have a couple of pārtai, and that is around when you opened up, you spoke about going out to all of the iwi for consultation. So, and just that consultation, were Te Arawa River Iwi Trust present at that consultation process as well?
I've only spoken to the previous operational meeting that I've had a chance to go to. Was it last year?
Oh, kapai. I thought you meant that all of the river iwi had gathered together for a kōrero to I suppose design or collaborate on how the program would roll out. So
that would be lovely to have that opportunity to come and down to the rohe and have a kōrero again with the whānau.
Ka pai. As you're well aware, I'm certain you're aware of Te Arawa River Iwi Trust is made up of a collection of 3 iwi. Ngāti Tahu, Ngāti Whāwa, Ngāti Kioro Tuara, and Tūhaurangi, Ngāti Wahio. And under that umbrella, you know, we have I suppose different levels of engagement, and in the first instance that would definitely be with Te Arawa River Iwi Trust. And then from there, they would korero with the other affiliates and work out, because, you know, that's kind of a bit more where the rubber will hit the road, so to speak, or the paddle will hit the hoi, will hit the water. So just, you know, it looks really exciting, and there would be just keeping it very high level, rather than sort of delving into how that might work. I'm sure that the Tarot team would really like to engage with you. So it's something that Joe will be able to work through with the CE with Joe as to how that would roll out.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. That'd be really great to haramai ki te kōrero kia koutou. For the next year is really quite critical, because currently we've got Hauraki, Maniapoto and Waikato Tainui kura in to trial the first full launch year, and then we're wanting to reach to Tarot and to our others with with what works and what didn't in terms of the program, to provide an improved ongoing program. So to be able to come and kōrero with Joe in the whānau would be wonderful.
Excellent. Kia ora. And is this at all, how is it funded? How is the kura, so where does Waikato Regional Council fit into the program?
Oh, ka pai o kātai. Evelyn, so Waikato Regional Council are currently funding all the kura to be on this program at the moment. We have 22 kura plus to reach across the region. We currently can meet 7. So we've gone to the Waikato River Authority for the next 3 years to 5, firstly, stage 1, 3 years. And that's been submitted. It's costing us 100,000 to meet those 7 kura. We're going for match funding, but we also, like I said, I'm not interested in going to our iwi for the funding space, but in terms of our TAs being able to support, each kura costs 4,000 per term. And saying that, it is because it's such a unique program. It's bringing along 2 wakatete, safety boats, matauranga Māori, the experts. It really is something that you cannot find anywhere else in the country. As an education evaluator for the Education Review Office, I've had the privilege of reviewing across the country in Okura programs for 5 years, so knowing what's good, what programs are good and worth the future. This Kura Waita is definitely one of those programs, mātauranga. So that's what it looks like in terms of funding wise, and stakeholders that may be interested in coming in.
Kia ora, thank you. Just one last question, and that is around the delivery. So you spoke around going to Waikato Iti with tūwhare toa, and you know, so that you could be certain of the delivery around that area. So I'm quite curious to know what your delivery is from Hoka Falls through to Pohatiroa. So you talked about engaging or acknowledging tūwhare toa and then Raukawa. So in between there is Te Arawa River Iwi Trust and Ngāti Tahu Ngāti Whāua having the mana awa within that stretch of the river. So I'm quite, and because we in 2021, Te Arawa River Iwi Trust embarked on a very, on our first Tirohoi, and it was beautiful, and it was the same thing. We needed to learn the history, so, you know, the hitori. So we went back to Waikato Iti, stayed at Ohaki Marae, went through to Pohara Marae, then through to being hosted by Waikato Tainui. We ended up by staying at Hopuhopu. And, you know, it was a beautiful experience, and then making our way out to Puaha or Waikato. So just, you know, as I said, I'm quite curious to hear around the delivery of what is Te Arawa River Iwi Trust stretch of the Waikato.
Yeah, a great pātai, thank you. Actually, it was that Tarot Tirohoi, thank you for the invitation, that I jumped on with your whānau, with the team, and went from Hamilton to, where do we end up? Ngaruahia, and was able to hop off there. That was part of the flourishing of the Kurawaiti Kurawaita, to be honest. The addition of going on there going, wow, this is it. This is exactly what we can provide our rangatahi and all our iwi to join in together. So, yeah, thank you. You just reminded me that was one of the sparks, was going on that Tirohoi for me.
Oh, the privilege was all ours. It was an amazing experience.
It was so cool. But also in terms of the narrative, the pūrākau coming from Tūwharetoa down in Te Arawa, that would be given the mana to Tūwharetoa. So I've been to the co-governance with Te Kōpuaka Napanapa, and will be in tomorrow's Tūwharetoa Hui too. The same pātai will be, this is a program, how would you like to be a part of this program? I.e., for me, it's not us telling the mana whenua how, it's asking them how would they like to be involved in this program. We have had parts of Tūwharetoa ask us to go up to the smaller, the hard to reach kura in the area up by Waikatoati, around there. And that's one thing we'd like to do for 2023, is but in between times be able to have the conversation with them.
Look, thank you, but I think I'm not quite sure if you're getting the point of what I'm saying, and that's acknowledging the fact that from the base of Hooker Falls through to Pohaturoa is the stretch where Te Arawa River Iwi Trust is within Arohe. Has there been engagement, is my question.
Oh, not to this point. Yes.
Yeah, so do you get what I'm saying? You're talking, it's one thing to talk to mana whenua, please ensure that you have the correct mana whenua.
Yep, great. Kapai. Yep, marama ana tira. That's who we'd really like to be talking with.
So, I think that there are some conversations that need to take place as soon as possible.
Right.
And I think before we get down that road too far, where there's actually becomes a point of perhaps where we're actually going to lock heads. I'll be following this very closely because I want to ensure that everyone has got the correct information from the correct people, from the correct iwi.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Kia ora. So I'm going to pass over to my co-chair.
Okay, kia ora ana, he pai ana.
Kia ora Kataraina, aroha mai, I can't hear.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ka pai tēnā. I do believe that if you want to make this a uniformed type of program for Waikato River, we do have, the 5 iwi along that river that has worked hard to be able, and of course Waipa, you can't forget Waipa and Maniapoto. I think that at some stage you might need to have a conversation with the united rōpū of the whole 5 iwi in the first instance, so that you can determine how the program will suit each one of the 5 in their part, because I do believe that the river is one as a whole river. We were lucky enough as the 5 iwi to have sections that we kind of look after, but on the whole, we look after the whole of the awa. So your program in theory should be a united type of program, and it'd be great if you could sort of call for expressions of interest of the 5 iwi for kura in their area to come together as one and then do both of those classes. so that each one is learning about each section as the whole river. He pai ana mo tō mahi, but I do take on board what Evelyn is saying, and I think the best way around that is the first instance is to bring the 5 iwi together. You don't have to have all of us. Like, you can only have one of each iwi who works like the CEOs or whatever, talk about the program going forward, how do we amalgamate this, and then work with each one to say, hey, can I work in your section, blah, 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 you know what I'm talking about. Because I don't want to see the program die because we've upset one of the iwi in the river, because it'd be sad to jump over an iwi and go to the next one because the relationship was severed before you got too far with it. In saying that, I do know that WRC, I'm not sure where the funding is going for the next 3 years. I haven't actually sat around a financial group to see where the finances is coming from there. But I'm sure we can talk to you if we are looking at WRA to help fund that, because the restoration of the river is a component of what you're doing. So, ka pai tēnā. A good presentation. Some food for thought in here, because all of our JMAs that we have with WRC is each one of the iwi on the river. Ka pai? So, and they do on occasions meet as the whole 5 to do certain take around that river, around our river. So that's me, but ka pai.
Thank you very much. He pātai aroha mai. Is there a forum where all the iwi do come together, or is there a way that you'd like me to?
Well, I don't know around a forum, but they do meet for lots of things. Right now they're meeting around the reforms, they're meeting around the 3 waters, blah, 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 PC1, it's not hard to get the 5 iwi to have a korero. It's about being, I guess for me, it's about making sure everybody's got the same korero, and then you can make those relationships with individuals. Like, I wouldn't presume that Oka would want to be involved with tūwharetoa at Waikotoiti, but in saying that, you don't know. You don't know.
Ka pai. That's
blah,
really
blah.
great feedback, korua. Nā mihi kia korua.
Kathy.
Thank you, Anna. Look, I wanted to follow up. We had a conversation in Te Kopua Kanapanapa meeting, and I did say that it would be good to get you to present to the Environmental Performance Committee. I just wanted you've probably had this conversation with Brent Sinclair, and I just wanted to let you know that although it didn't happen in the last Environmental Performance Committee of the year, Brent said that he was looking to do a much bigger presentation on Enviro schools and also what you're doing for the new council. And perhaps, if you can get some of the things sorted that Evelyn and Katarina are referring to, you might be ready to actually do that for maybe the first Environmental Performance Committee of the year. That would be great. Anyway, just wanted to raise that with you, that it's not off the table, but that it was going to be something that was for the new council, like an overview of it all. So that sounded good to me.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Yeah, looking forward to that. And thank you for the guidance around Kathy, around Evelyn's and Katarina's korero.
Thank you.
Stu.
Kia ora, Anna Rose, Stu Kneebone here. Hey, I tautoko the aspirations that we've heard just now, but I also note in your paper that you've identified one of the key issues as funding, and you've talked in number 14 about identifying and partnering with other key funding organisations, which I guess includes funding organisations. Would I be correct in assuming that the initial 100K investment that's a WRC investment, I think, from memory, wasn't it, is probably at the smaller end of the scale of what we'd need to get up to, what we'd need to grow to I guess, realise the aspirations that we've just been hearing about?
Yeah, absolutely, Stu, ngā mihi ki a koe. It is at the smaller end. Yes, to be able to reach to ensure that all our iwi partners get the opportunity, if they're interested, is to reach all those kura is that's quite a number. And within those kura, there's kura kaupapa Māori, and then there's kura that have rōpū reo inside them. There's, long, hard to reach kura that are strongly influenced in their community and marae spaces that will have expressed interest. So it'll be quite an opportunity to be able to support that funding space.
Yeah, so look, no doubt we'll be talking to you. Well, whoever's around the table next year will be talking to you with our LTP discussions. But and look, I'm confident that the WRA would be really interested in continuing this relationship as well. But I think, Ko-Chair Kataraina, there's the conversations you're just talking about with all of the iwi. I just think that those funding issues need to be at front of mind with those discussions as well, to make sure we don't grow our aspirations quicker than we can grow the funding to go with it, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stu. Good point.
Good, thank you. Perry, I think you would like to add or?
Kia ora ana.
Tēnā koe,
I suppose it would be more than just an aspiration, because the importance of maunga, awa, moana, whenua to Māori is paramount as to an aspiration. It's not an aspiration. This is a necessity to ensure that the protection of the Waikato River is paramount. And the way we can, you've started to achieve that is by putting it through the schools and making them more aware. While we have Māori schools, I think it's probably important to, in the future, to extend that to every school, so that every school is aware of the importance of the Waikato River, not only to the Five River Iwi Trust, but to Aotearoa as a whole, and what it does for those outside of our rohe as well, which is the what is supplied for Auckland alone. So it's necessary for everybody to know exactly how important this awa is to all of us, especially Māori.
Tēnā koe, Perry. E tautoko ana tērā kōrero ai ki ngā tangata whenua, ngā mana whenua ki a tātou whānau Pākehā hoki, he tino matatai tēnei kaupapa. We looked at the figures and there are 44 schools, so there's 22 kura kaupapa, and you're right, not only them, but to be able to reach the other 22, so in total there's 44 across our region, to be able to provide the mātauranga too would be, really important, especially in times of the local curriculum being overhauled, for the curriculum itself to be localised now. Ai, tautoko, Perry.
Kia ora, thank you, Anna. And if there are no further questions, I think just, thank you for the I think good, robust kōrero that we've needed to have. And really, I guess if I really want to stress a certain point, you will understand and know the importance of getting the history right. Because once we have that, once it's, written down and it goes out, it's really hard to retrieve. So I just really want to express a little bit of concern from our part, as well as express the need to ensure that consultation with all river iwi and ensuring that the right people are telling the right story for the right piece of the river. Kia ora.
Kia ora, tēnā koe, Evelyn. Nā mihi.
Fine. I can move the report. If somebody would like to second, Kathy, in favour. Kia ora.
So who's delivering that one? It's who. Kia ora. So there's a lot of pretty pictures in here. I think it's quite good. Yeah, it's a Māori thing. So if you give an overview of what it is, Iti, because unfortunately, the board pack was a bit late going to some people. So there's some, I'm not going to take it as read, but if you gave us an overview on all of the pages, and then the people can ask questions on what they might have read or heard, it'd be great. So everybody, this is Iti.
Kia ora koutou anō, ngā mihi, co-chairs Evelyn and Kataraina. We do have a presentation that we're able to present, and Jess might just like a bit of time just to organise that through. I'd like to introduce Dave Byers, who's our Biosecurity Officer for the Integrated Catchment Biodiversity Biosecurity Team. He has got a presentation for Dharma Wallaby Program. Welcome to Dave. Kia ora, my co-presenter.
Kia ora. I'll go through, this is a slideshow that's been done for numerous talks, but I will just flick through some of the key ones, and I'm sure there'll be some questions to come out of it. But so this is the National Wallaby Eradication Program now. And we've been battling wallabies for well over a decade now, but this is the first time we've had sufficient funding to be able to actually make an impact on it. So in the North Island, we've got Dharma Wallaby, the smaller one, and down in the South Island, which is the second part of the program, we've got the Bennett's Wallaby, which are quite a bit larger, usually over a metre high, standing. Next slide. So it just gives you a quick idea of the size. And the guy standing on the trailer there with the Bennetts down below and the smaller one up the top. Having said that, the more we look, the more we find. Next slide, please. And so when we originally looked at where we would undertake the work and where we would hold the line, this map was produced. So the centre of it, the orange area, is what we call the core area. And that's where the highest numbers basically exist. And as we got out into that purple area, that's the area that we were going to go. We had some inkling that there's the odd breeding population in that area that's spread out. And we wanted to find where those were and undertake control of those, and then push back to that yellow line that you can see there. So if we pop to the next slide. So that was back in 2020 that map was produced. We've been quite busy since then. So all the orange lines on there indicate where the dog surveillance teams or the camera monitoring teams have been looking for wallaby. Although it's a little bit hard to see on there, they're quite busy. All the dots that you see there indicate wallaby in one form or another. So, for instance, the red ones are where wallaby have been shot. The black and the blue ones are where wallaby sign has been found. So that's usually in the form of something that the dog's picked up, either scat or hair or a footprint. And I guess the concerning thing for us in the Waikato is that it's now evident that it's crossed the Waikato River. For a long time, we thought the Waikato River would act as a barrier and stop wallabies getting across. But certainly, especially where the bridgeheads are and the dams are, there's evidence that they've come across. So you've got that Aotearoa one, which is the most recent one, just almost at the bottom of the map there. That's just in the last week. There was a positive find there. Can we go to the next slide? So I've had to go even further down. We've got the old Pepe one down near Turangi, and last year one wallaby was reported by a member of the public and shot down near Kawakawa Bay. So, and these itinerant ones and ones we're dealing with at the moment that are way outside is on the west coast there at Mokau. That's happening as we speak. So a member of the public again came across a female wallaby with a joey in the pouch. So ones like that have obviously got there with human assistance. And we did also have one last year up at Kennedy Bay as well. So those ones are quite concerning as to how they get there, whether they've been taken there as pets and then escaped or released. We don't know at this stage. So the main methods at the moment, we're still sort of in that search phase. We're using the wallaby dog teams. We now have 4 to 5 full-time contractors working just with the dogs. Equally, we've got a number of contractors putting out cameras, and then we're following up with a mix of, there's been some aerial 1080 operations, particularly where we can join up with the Department of Conservation and just build on some of the work they're doing. But the majority of it has been developing night shooting practices, using thermal scopes on rifles and using drones with thermal cameras on and proving to be very effective, especially where we're just dealing with smaller populations in that open farmland type country. And also, as this is becoming more and more well known, we're getting a lot more public sighting reports through the app, which we're able to follow up on. And that's been really informative as to where things are popping up outside the known range. Pop to the next one, please. I just got a couple more, I think. So the main thrust here is that the wallabies in their higher numbers. So actually, if you just pop back to that last slide. So just towards the end of May and June of this year, with some of the surplus budget from last year, we undertook quite a lot of night shooting up around inside that core area, just around the farmland, so all those red dots. So that represents just over 2,000 wallabies that were shot in a 6-week period from night shooting. And to be honest, that's without even really trying. So I think, the issue in that core area, you'll be talking tens of thousands of animals in there to deal with. And that's mainly, the damage that they're doing, particularly to native foresters. I guess I kind of look at these things as guinea pigs on steroids. They eat very low to the ground, so they'll eat everything and they'll eat quite close down to the ground. So they don't leave much, even for seedlings to recover from. But other than that, where they're on that farmland bush pasture margin, they've got to be having an impact on grass values and production values as well, and certainly the forests. For the production forest, though, an issue there as well. So the next aerial operation we have planned is Kaingaroa Forest. There's about 7,000 hectares in there, and we're also looking at ground-based on Mangakakramea and night shooting on there as well. Working with Michelle Phillips on that one at the moment. And again, the bay sort of sorts out the bay, and I'm pretty much in charge of what goes on operationally on the Waikato side of the region. And the bay, currently the biggest ground operation that they're about to get underway is Ngongataha. So I could go on for a whole hour on this, but if there's questions.
Don't bother, because it's obvious that wallabies are a problem.
Yeah.
So I guess a couple of things for me would be, can you see wallabies in your lifetime being eradicated? If I'm not presuming your lifetime is going to be short, long, or whatever, but, the increase of them since I first started is multiplied in such a way that it's unbelievable. So I'm not sure, as a councillor, I'm not quite sure how the funding for this is I don't know, how do I say this, is worth the hassle, because it doesn't seem to be getting less. Wallabies seem to be getting more. The more money we seem to be throwing at trying to get rid of this, it's not working. So What are we doing wrong? Because it started off when I first came along into a councillor, which is going into my 7th year now. From and this is only hypothetical, you know, say from 10 to now 100. So you're not actually, nobody's actually got me to the point where I actually believe our eradication of these are actually working. So
I think it's fair to say we're well in the control game at the moment. Getting to eradication, getting the very last one, that's always been a big challenge, especially on a mainland situation. But this is the first time we've had the resources, and these sorts of undertakings are resource hungry. But certainly, I think it's possible. It's certainly possible to make a big dent in it so that we don't end up essentially ignoring it and just having that problem expand. And I think everyone that's been involved in this at sort of my level has been quite blown away by the numbers that are being picked up at night. Again, this is one of those animals that people don't see during the daytime. And it's not until you get out there with these thermal cameras and see just what the numbers are that are coming out. It's quite incredible. And you'll see the one that was taken, I think close to Rotawiti 15, that made the headlines. That was one of them.
Okay, well, I'm going to hold you accountable for your korero right now. So at the end of my next term, you're going to have taken this down from 150 to 10, you know, sort of thing. But hey, good luck, you know, because I do understand. It was sad to hear that they're now being seen at a Moko, you know, and these sightings doesn't give me any tick boxes around us helping to eradicate it. So, you know, as a councillor in some of the areas it's showing up, and it's a worry. So it really is a New Zealand, North Island effort to try and get rid of this. You can't expect Waikato Regional Council to do this on their own. So I wish you luck in trying to work with all of the other regional councils around how we do this, and it becomes a total North Island worry, and how we work around it to get it done. Kathy, you got a question?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time that quite a lot of money has been given to it. So although I agree that it's unlikely that we'll be able to eradicate them, I mean, that's just my personal opinion, because it becomes extremely expensive to get to find and get the last ones. But just thinking from the fact that that wallabies, you know, that they're not like rats in terms of the way that they breed. I mean, my understanding, and you can correct me, Dave, if I've got this wrong, is that they have one joey a year, sometimes two. And so if you do actually manage to hit a lot of them through night shooting with thermal scopes, etc., and using the dogs, I would have thought that would make a huge difference. So I guess I'm just trying to get an idea of what kind of population modelling have we done based on on how rapidly they breed. Because I know that, you know, people have done that kind of thing with things like Maui dolphin, because they obviously don't breed very rapidly at all, and trying to figure out exactly, you know, whether it's possible to get a species like that to actually regenerate. And I'm looking at this and thinking, and looking at it the other way, how effective is it when they don't breed that rapidly? How quickly can we use this money to get at least the numbers down to a point where it's manageable?
You're right about the breeding rate, but equally possums are the same. And, you know, there's a good example there of how those numbers just can really jump up if they're not controlled. I think in terms of parallel with this work, there's a lot of research work being undertaken, primarily by Landcare Research, and that's looking at answering some of those questions that you have. And we don't have sort of a census type knowledge of what the numbers are like out there. Suffice to say, you know, in that core area that we've identified that there are a lot. And I guess the more these public sightings come in and get reported by mountain bikers, etc., we start building a better picture of what we've got. Equally, the more we look, the more we seem to be finding down towards that Awakino end. So that's probably the best answer I can give you at this stage. There are gaps, and there's research that needs to be done to answer some of those questions.
Kia ora, Dave. Great to see you. Thank you for your presentation. As you're well aware, we've been having this conversation with you in particular for a number of years now. And I just want to remind council to listen to the locals. We've actually highlighted this a number of years ago, probably a good 5 years ago, really, around the wallabies and the concern that we had, especially on Maunga Kakaramea and the Paeroa Ranges. So they had been evident there. And the reason that we really flagged it was that we were starting to see them on the roadside. They'd been run over, and then we'd noticed they were coming sort of like further south of the highway. Take seriously what the locals are saying to you. And when I say you, I mean council, not particularly, it's not anyone in particular, but the council need to adhere, and often your response is too slow. Sometimes the council process is more of a hindrance than it is an enabler. So I just want to put that out there. I know we're starting to get some skates on, and there's the MPI funding, and actually it's come under the microscope quite a bit. It's been quite a national focus for a couple of years now. But even before then, Ngāti Tahu, Ngāti Whaua were saying to council, we have a wallaby issue up on the Paeroas, and there's a wallaby issue up on Maunga Kakaramea, and understandable, there were cameras and there were dogs put out there, up there and out there, and they didn't really show a lot, but the locals know, they go out there all the time. And so, kia kaha, but we have to do it as a collective. It's not a, as you said, it's not a council issue. It's everyone's issue. So work as a collective, be united in your approach.
Noted.
Kia ora.
Oh, yeah, no, look, I really support this work, and I think the council do too, Evelyn. No, there's been no pushback at all. Look, I do a lot of mountain biking in Whakawhangaungatanga, and there's sort of a couple of native blocks in there that have got tracks in them, and there's not a shred of greenery anywhere in there on the forest floor. You see wallabies all the time in there, eh? It's incredible how much damage they do. Dave, the likes of the Morco one, any sort of insights as to whether that's stupid people or people who are being anti environmentalism or anything like that, or?
It's really hard to say. I think for some of these itinerant ones that we find, it simply comes about from people going hunting at night time, throwing the carcasses on the back of the ute. They get home in the early hours, they sleep in, the kids get up and they go fossicking through, and then they'll find a joey. Oh, okay. And then that becomes the pet.
Yeah, right.
And then as they grow up, they scratch and they bite, and they're not very nice pets. So they either escape or they just get released into the area. I think it's still a bit early to know whether there's it's an intentional release for establishing hunting populations, or just as a reaction to the national program itself. It's really hard, and I guess that will come from the community as to whether that's happening or not. Just keeping our ears to the ground, I think, listening to the conversations.
Cool, thank you. Good up.
Thank you for that. Wallabies are but going forward and into the rest of the paper, is there anything in there you want to highlight around some of the
Kia ora. I guess I just want to highlight this is a report for the operational hui. It's for the Integrated Catchment Management ICM team. And it's for the period of the 2021 to 2022 year through to 30th of June. We do have an update with regards to some of the catchment areas for Whirinaki Stream, Tahinatara, Pueto, Mangakara, Reparoa catchments. They are within the report, specific to the Tararohi. And with regards to the Whirinaki Catchment Restoration Project, that was established in 2018 with support from the WRA. And the group meets regularly with regards to receiving restoration project reports from the local catchment areas with the team supported from the Taupō office and team lead Deborah Nicol, who is online with us today. We have had recent meetings with Tuharangi Tribal Trust in regards to a restoration potential replacement project, and that is on page 3 for further detail. We do have the fencing constructed in the native plants to 10,000 and 6,000 exotic species across 4 properties highlighted within page 3, again in receipt of WRA funding for that catchment. A project for the Mangakara stream was a receipt of WRA funding to 90,878, which was over a 4-year period. So we're in stage 2, which comprised of some willow clearance, which was completed June 2022, this year. Pueto Stream has also received funding, and our first stage was with regards to willow removal in the Broadlands Bridge area, and that was undertaken November through to December. So that has continued. There has been recent high flow flood monitoring and have been in regular contact with our iwi partners just to communicate when we do have those severe weather events, which are particularly important, especially for the Tararohi, for the Waihu Tapu, that are regularly monitored with our team who do go out into the field. And we do have Flood Room Live links that we're able to supply for iwi to assist with that information. We have biosecurity updates from Dave as well as co-contributor to the report for Integrated Catchment Management. I thought it was important to include that with our possum management, given the boundaries and the territories for Maungakakaramia for the whānau Tara. So that completes our pest management side for the report to assist with the maps.
Yeah, actually, just a quick question to do with number 10 under the river management activities. So I know that there has been this staff vacancy for a very long time. I mean, I'm not sure, is it what, 18 months now that we haven't had? It was James, I think, who left, wasn't it? And he was a great worker. I'm just wondering if we haven't replaced James yet. I mean, have you thought about what else could be done? Because a lot of people have contacted me to express concern about the delays in work to do with river management, and I'm beginning to think, do we have to think about this differently? Like, what else can we actually do to resolve this problem? And also, is there anything else which is slowing down the river management work? Is it just about the staff vacancy, or have we got other things which are problems?
Well, thank you, Councillor Kathy, for your pātai. We have had the vacancy, correct, for around about the 18-month period. We have looked at a Plan B option within Council, which is to assist with a engineering contractor consultant to provide that support for river management, which also includes for the Tararohi, the Waihu Tapu, for example, and the Whirinaki, just to manage sediment, for example. So that is currently working through in the last month. So we're happy to report that. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Good luck today. I know there's a lot of things. So I'll move this if someone will second. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Next up, we have the Freshwater Policy Review. Angus Gray.
Angus,
I
you're on.
believe, yeah, you're speaking to this.
Oh, there he is.
Ah, nice to meet you, Angus. Face to face.
Kia ora kōrua.
Ah. Thank you. Look forward to your report.
A tēnā kōrua o tira tēnā koutou. Wai ki te tāno i a koutou I roto I tēnei āhuatanga while Angus is loading the presentation. It is great to be here after the last two presentations. This is important but not as exciting as what we've just discussed in the last two presentations. So we'd like to talk to you about the Freshwater Policy Review. We won't take the report as read, but the presentation does summarise what is in the report. And linked to this, your chair, I think he's your chair, your rep anyway, to the WRA, sorry, Roger, and Stu will be aware that the Te Ture Whaimana is going through a review, as you will be also. So we're looking to integrate the two work streams. It's still very much in its infancy in terms of the discussions with the WRA. We're fortunate as a team here that I'm involved with the Tangata Whenua engagement, and Gavin Donald is managing this project as well. Both Gavin and I are co-directors for the WRA Te Ture Whaimana review. So we're looking to integrate that so that it's efficient in terms of the use. We benefited also from an initial hui with Joe 2 weeks ago to start discussing how this project rolls out. I'll hand over to someone who knows what they're talking about. Kia ora.
Kia ora tipene. Kia ora Katarana, Evelyn. Okay, nice to see you again, and kia ora Tarat Whānau as well. So this presentation just gives a bit of an overview of the context of where we're at with the Freshwater Policy Review and where we're going, as well as a bit of an update on Plan Change 1, because our planner Irwin is heavily involved in those proceedings, so just a bit of an update on that as well. So yeah, as I said, the purpose of today is just to update you on where the community engagement's at, sector and territorial authority engagement, Tangata Whenua engagement, and the early stages of policy development as we start to move through this freshwater RMA planning process. And yeah, as I said, an update on Plan Change 1. I've also included time for a short discussion on some of the joint management agreement obligations regarding the joint working party for how Tarat and Waikato Regional Council would like to work together as we proceed through this. So a bit of context. So the Freshwater Policy Review is responding to the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, which came out with a bunch of other directions about stock exclusion, farm planning, came in the wake of Plan Change 1, so it's a busy space. Waikato Regional Council will be giving effect to it through changing the Regional Policy Statement and the Regional Plan provisions that relate to freshwater. And we need to do that by 2024. So the scope of that includes water quality and water quantity, and activities that affects those, including structures, water takes, diffuse point source discharges. There's quite a lot to go through. So a bit of an overview of the engagement. So this project is kind of doing casting the net wide for the engagement, including engaging with Tangata Whenua, community, sector and stakeholders, citizen reference groups. We're looking to put out an expression of interest for those in September. Those reference groups are pretty much an advisory group to dive into the detail of certain policy provisions as required. And finally, advisory groups, which might be for more contentious issues. If we need more experts in the room to nuts some of that stuff out, we can put those together as well. So the community engagement. So we've recently run, there's an error there, there's actually 10 community engagement workshops across the region. And those were one-day water workshops, which were held throughout the region. And it was just an opportunity for the public, the general public, to come in and find out about what we're doing here and have a conversation about what they want for the state of their waterways, what are their aspirations, what do they value about freshwater, and what kind of good work are they already doing on the ground, and what are their ideas for how we can kind of achieve some of this. We've got a good mix of urban and rural stakeholders as well, and generally there was positive feedback and they appreciated it. sector engagement. So we ran some sector engagement workshops as well, and that was just trying to understand what their priorities were, what were the challenges, and what work they've been doing as well. Some of the groups we talked to were the dry stock sector, dairy sector, forestry, territorial authorities as well, and water users. I'll now just pass over to Tipinia to talk about the tangata whenua engagement that we have been doing and are intending to do as well.
Kia ora, we've got several phases in terms of engagement with tangata whenua, and so we're in the initial phase now. That is confined somewhat to going out to our JMA partners and also with the Hauraki Collective, where there's a pending post-settlement arrangement there. So just to honour those agreements, and Angus will talk more to the detail of what that looks like later on. We're also in a knowledge gathering phase, and he hoha ki te haere ki te iwi ki te kōrero, he hato koutou whakaaro, kua kōrero kētia te kōrero. And so, you know, there's the environmental management plan and so on that you already have. So got a guy beaver in a way, he's quite a ninja at this sort of work, going through the environmental management plans and starting to capture the thoughts and then put them amongst this piece of work to test it with you so that you can see that that's what's really happened. And then, of course, mātauranga is very much a part of that. It's taken a little while to get to that stage before we can come out so that we don't waste your time when we do. And then looking at what the findings will be between April and September next year, developing policy options and draft policy. What does that look like for Tarrant? Well, that's part of the kōrero that we will need to have. You're used to working a certain way with plan change 1. Will that still work or not? And so it's a way that we're still looking through things, even in terms of the way that your engagement is resourced. There's a paper going through council process at the moment that's going to be looking at some of that, so that there is fairness across the board in that regard. So the challenge that we have is December 24 is a hard deadline. It's a Crown imposed deadline. It's a deadline that we're excited about because all of us have been frustrated, I guess, with the inability to move some things in Freshwater. So he's hoping that this will be a real game changer in that space. Looking at the next slide, we acknowledge that in terms of resourcing and doing as much of the heavy lifting as we can in partnership with iwi is recognising, you know, the work program that you have in front of you, and you know, capacity is always an issue. So finding smart ways to work together, and we'll work through what those details are as we go through. I've talked a bit about the literature analysis, and then there'll be a series of wānanga there, which is part of phase 2. And for Te Arawa, we're asking what would suit better. Would it be better to have a hui repuro or horo and/or rotorua and/or taupo? I don't know. So ka koutou te tikanga, we'll work through what that will look like, and then pepper the wānanga throughout the rohe so it becomes easier. For example, you might have Te Arawa whānau that live here. It would make sense for them to come to the hui here. Te a koutou tērā.
So the other part of this is how the formal arrangement of how Tarrant would like to work together through the joint management agreements. Excuse me. So the agreements provide for, you know, when excuse me, when the regional council is preparing an RMA planning document, it provides an opportunity for Tarrant to be involved in that via a joint working party. And I guess that's something I'm keen to test with you and hear any initial feedback on what you might want that to look like. The joint working parties has 2 main functions, kind of one's at the front end of the plan and one's at the back end when you notify it. So that front end one is about discussing and agreeing on the process, the timeline, the scope, and how Tarrant will be involved. And that's in addition to the engagement that we're already proposing. And the second recommendation is on the final form and content. So the process for once we've got that shiny draft plan, you know, how do we get that across to you to have that final check before it goes out as well? So kind of over at the end of this, be keen for any feedback on how you might like that joint working party to run. Yeah, happy to have that kōrero as well. Acknowledging that on that front end recommendation, the scope and timeframes are actually kind of prescribed a lot by the RMA and the NPS as well. But the way you might like to be involved, you might want to provide feedback on that as well. So policy development, so staff are doing an initial review of the actual regional plan to find out what some of those issues are. So that's just part of the issues identification becomes before then identifying options to resolve those. And which parts of the plan will need to change to give effect to the new national policy statement. We've been working with some of the internal staff who are experts in some of this stuff to make sure that, you know, the plans we write, when you try and implement them on the ground, is it working? What are the issues? Getting feedback from them as well. Once we've had this phase 2 wānanga to really understand what the tangata whenua aspirations and values are, then we'll start trying to understand what the options are once we've got that information available to feed into that policy development. And a bit of an update on Plan Change 1. So it's before the Environment Court at the moment, and that's for the Waikato Waipa catchments. I understand that Tarot, through the River Iwi Collective, one of those collective forums which was mentioned earlier, is a party to these proceedings. But yeah, I think there's been some progress from the court. I know it's quite a complex proceedings with overseer, the pending regulations, the NPS, the national environmental standards. It has really kind of complicated things a bit further, but I understand that the court is kind of untangling that at the moment. MFE's redeveloping the overseer tool, and I understand that mediation in June began on point source discharges, which was successful. And there's been an expert conference on overseer just in the last few days as well, which I think was slightly less successful from what I've heard from Irwin Tribuko, our planner. And just, I guess on that, we'll be keeping in mind what's coming out of that process, and we just have to keep across what comes out of Plan Change 1 from that court and respect that. So yeah, just to summarise, community engagement round recently finished and some stakeholder engagement, tangata whenua engagement. We've had a lot of initial hui. Next steps looking to get into some wānanga. Early stages of identifying issues in the plan underway, and PC1 is progressing through the Environment Court process. And I believe, kia ora, tēnā koutou, that's us. Any pātai, any comments?
Oh, tēnā kōrua, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'm pleased to hear that you know, you're taking a literature and an analysis of the iwi environmental management plans. You know, a lot of work goes into collating and producing a IEMP, and it's good to see that, you know, council are actually using them, and that they are being read. You know, the biggest worry is that you produce them or you develop them and then they sit on the shelf. And Tarot went through a review and updated their environmental plan, I think it was last year, and I think some of the affiliates have done the same as well. So a lot of effort has gone into them. So I do acknowledge the fact that you've actually based a lot of it, and a lot of the values that sits values and its aspirations around Tarot as an entity, as well as the affiliates, should sit within those iwi environmental management plans. So, just wonder whether or not your deadline, whether the plan that you have in process, you know, that you're putting into place is going to allow you to meet that deadline of December 2024. You know, I'm not quite sure how the government set these deadlines. So it's certainly not, you know, it's not often in collaboration with those that are actually trying to meet them. So I guess I'm just curious to see, you know, how you guys are feeling, whether or not you feel that you can actually produce something that is sufficient, that is within that time frame. And working through, I think the best thing that you can do is to continue to work through the Tarot CEO, who has a great relationship, or is building a good relationship with the affiliates, and really they're the conduit that will filter out that information, both you know, collecting and then reiterating what, you know, the progress that has been made. And you know, as far as Te Arawa River Iwi Trust goes, and, you know, Perry, please, if you differ, please say so. I'm sure you will. But, you know, I know that we want to look at determining our own position first as affiliates, and then how do we work then as a collective. So Tarot support both a individual and collective approach to things. And so that's probably something that needs to be determined from here. You've had some, you know, we've tried to sort of meet, but I think in the first instance, it was really important that Tarot sort of establish their own internal process on how they want to work through, and then we'll guide you both through how that will pan out as far as each affiliate goes.
Kia ora. I think that also adding to Evelyn is that, where you're going to wānanga with and engage with iwi, hapu, whānau, it has to be resourced correctly as well. We can't expect people to turn up to a hui, which I'm sure you won't turn up to a hui without being paid. So therefore, I'm not saying we have to pay them, but the right resources should be put in place to ensure that we get iwi and hapu and whānau at those engagement hui so that we can have a clearer picture. So importantly enough, resourcing, as with anything, however, this particular one, resourcing is really important to ensure that we get people there.
Kia ora. Those are, to all of those points, the ability to meet the December 2024 deadline gives us a headache once a week. So we continue to turn our minds as to how to do that. One of the challenges that we have in the tangata whenua engagement was, like I've come in to support the team, and many of you will know Anton Coffin, an extremely capable person, which is great, but also a problem because he's been pulled into local government reform. And so that's created a bit of a misstep in the way progress tangata whenua engagement. I did hear the comment about the updated iwi environmental management plans. I do hope that council has those because we're using what's on council files. Okay, that's great. In terms of resourcing, that's underway. I'm not a council employee, so I'm happy to promise you whatever you need in that regard. I'm sure I'll be corrected after this. But the other part that you may want to do, Evelyn talked about both a collective and individual approach. You may well need a resource to support you to go through that process. And again, I can't promise that because I don't have the delegation to do that. But what does that start to look like so that we can front foot what Tarot's needs are going forward? Do you have any comments?
Just want to tautoko what Stephen says. Yeah, the deadline is imposed on us, and the scale of the task at hand with the amount of people that we need to have a meaningful discussion with, it will be really challenging. That's kind of why we're hoping that the iwi management plans will be the first shortcut so that we can come and say, well, here's what you've already said. You know, Freshwater values your vision. That's not new. That's in iwi management plans and has been for a while. So if we can pull that out when we start that conversation and say, what do you value about Freshwater? Here's what you've already said. What else do you value? Have we got it right? I think once we get into these wānanga, we will know, we'll get a sense of the scale. We'll hear from the iwi and tangata whenua. We'll know how much conversation needs to happen, and we'll have to just adapt and roll with that. And yeah, thank you for the pointer in terms of working through the Tarot CE. Yeah, we're just keen to, whatever works for you guys, that's part of that kōrero. And yeah, resourcing. Yeah, I think the remuneration guidelines are running through the ELT at the moment. So just to acknowledge that, you know, Māori are providing kaupapa Māori expertise and should be resourced accordingly. But yeah, if there is an option for, and it's kind of difficult because there's not many people out there in this space, but, you know, getting a resource, a person to help facilitate these conversations, to help Tarot and, you know, the affiliates be involved, to help facilitate any wānanga, to be a liaison or to fly the Tarot flag at any hui. it's something that we're keen to explore what that could look like and should look like.
So, Korua, on number three, executive summary. Staff are planning for a round of engagements with iwi throughout July and August. So how have you got on so far with Tarot? It is now coming to the end of August.
Sorry. We had a hui with Joe two weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe.
Okay.
And that was just to kind of, introduce the project, introduce these engagement phases, test the waters with how she'd like us to work with the affiliates. So yeah, it went relatively well, I thought. And she gave us good steer as well.
Okay. Just making sure that with the end of August coming along.
Yeah, and just I can also update. We've also spoken to Waikato Tainui, Ati Tūwhare Toa.
Yeah, well, I'm not interested in them right this minute. Let's work on Tarot. So my other question around the consultation with Tarot would be, if you had an initial, is there more plans to have another with them? Because I guess with their updating of the iwi management plan, the initial corridor that you might have started off with, and of course, what you've picked up in between then and now, that might be important. So is there another one planned shortly to be with Tarot?
Yes, we're looking
WRC?
we're looking to hopefully have a wānanga at the end of November. And we're kind of looking for a steer on where's the most suitable place that would get the most Tarot whānau in the room.
Okay. Excellent. That's great. So, you know, one of the things that us, Waikato Regional Council, is worried about is the Te Whaimauna. We've always said in all of our meetings that we don't want to see the Te Whaimauna of the Awa Waikato having lots of changes, that it needs to change to suit this national water policy. You know, that's a worry for us. So it's important that when you are talking to iwi, now I'll talk about all iwi, is that you somewhere along all of that corridor we stress as Waikato Regional Council that we are not trying to change the Te Whaimauna, because we as the River Iwi fought to get that. You know, we fought to get that over many years, and what we don't want to do is to see its demise or being watered down because of this national water policy. So one of the things you'll need to do as you're talking to iwi is to ensure you get the iwi's back up around this national water policy that doesn't demise our Te Whenua Waimana, okay? So that's important, because the council has said that. We've been, well, me and Tepa have been saying that for ages. We do not want to see anything that demises or diminishes that piece of legislation that we fought hard to get many years ago, and Tipene will know that. So that's all I have to say. Keep up the good work. I'm happy with, as a councillor of the korero that you are doing with our people, our tangata whenua, mana whenua, whatever you like to call them, at this time. But it's important that you get the messaging right, and that you don't take a different message to one area that's different to the other, because that river is still one whole river. Yeah.
Thank you.
Kia ora, to that point, Katarana, ideally, the Te Whaimauna will be slightly ahead of this, so that this work, Te Whaimauna work is completed and then feeds into this work. That's what we're looking for. There's just a few moving parts to sort out, but essentially it's pointless doing this work and then it gets out of sync with the Te Whaimauna. It won't happen, and it's fortunate that some of the individuals involved are in both projects.
So I have a silly question then. You know, we're talking about freshwater policy, and of course it's about that, exactly, freshwater, what we're going to do to keep it fresh, blah, blah, blah. It hasn't happened yet in Tarot's area, but the pests that are in that water, for instance, if they ever got an input of koi carp up there, how on earth would we deliver, or how on earth would we fix that within this paperwork? I think it's important that somewhere along the National Freshwater Policy is that we keep the water clean now. One of the, as you know, down the other end of the hour, we are fighting to eradicate pests. What I don't want to see is that they get introduced like the wallaby because someone thought a koi carp was a good goldfish and then threw it in the river up there. You know, so we need to have all of those, I think, steps to ensure that we are on top of any pest that might come into that area before it even gets there. Yeah. Kapai. Just a thought.
Yeah, just in the Environmental Performance Committee, Mike Scarsbrook raised with us the fact that there's been some new science which has revealed the fact that, you know, the legacy issue with nitrogen, that we always thought that, for instance, in Lake Taupo, it could take 80 years for the nitrogen to come through. Mike alerted us to the fact that they've discovered it takes a lot shorter time in terms of groundwater and nitrogen. It's a lot shorter than was anticipated. So this is what I'm thinking. You know, we've had the Lake Taupo Protection Project, which was based on the science of the time, and we've had Healthy Rivers Plan Change 1, based on that science around how long it takes for nitrogen to come through. So I just wondered whether that new research, is that going to be considered as part of this freshwater policy review? Because it seems to me that could make a huge difference.
Yes, is the short answer.
Okay.
We're blessed that there's a brand new state of the environment report coming out almost perfectly in time to feed into this project. So we pretty much have an updated set of the state and the environment. Part of that will definitely feed into it.
Okay, thank you. I don't need to ask any. Stu?
Make the point that reporter Mike said in some situations, it's not across the board. That's important to remember. Yeah.
But just the fact that there's still a lot of unknowns, but I mean, it's still important to bear it in mind in any kind of policy review if it's in some places.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the kōrero, for the conversation. I'm going to move that the report be accepted. I can have somebody to second. Perry.
Evelyn.
The number 2. Are you happy with that number 2?
Yep, the committee considers and agrees.
Yeah, so that joint working party one was just to test, there's a formality in that joint management agreement as to how you'd like to be involved, and it could be an intensive process in addition to the engagement, but there are other ways to do it. You could have, it could be a joint working party, it could be regular hui on, regular progress updates in addition to the engagement, it could be written updates. There are different ways to meet that formality.
As long as the flexibility, I think, is within the resolution, that we can, you can frame that up. That, you know, it's not a one size suits all or fits all. It's you're able to sort of make sure that it's a little bit more bespoke.
Stu's going to second it.
Well, we're doing 2 resolutions. You want them separately?
No, I don't think so. The first one is just to be received anyway. The most important.
So
one
I accepted, and actually it was Perry that seconded.
Just trying to make it say you got it in both of us.
Kapa, but we haven't been consistent in doing that, so that's why I didn't worry.
Okay, thank you, Korua. Miffy, are you there? Oh, yep, she's there. The next paper is yours, Miffy. Okay. So give us a summary around the papers from 39 to 44, and then a quick kōrero around 45 onwards that might need some questioning into, please, Miffy. Okay.
Tēnā koutou, ko Miffy Foley toka ingoa. I'm the team leader of the Strategic and Spatial Planning team here at the Kunihera. And apologies for not being there in person. I woke up at the start of a cold this morning and decided I wouldn't share it with you all. So he rawe tiki te ia tātou I tēnei rā. So you may recall we did bring a report to you, to this committee in May last year. Hang on, I'm just going to share a presentation and then I will dive on in. Great, can you see that now? Everything seems to have frozen. no. Are you there? Oh, my
Miffy, we
Yes,
can't, we can't, you're frozen on our screen,
yes.
and plus your presentation's not up.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. You still
Yes.
got no presentation though.
Okay. Everything seems to have frozen at my end.
Hmm.
So apologies for that. I will keep trying to work on that. However, I can't actually.
If you're trying to speak, we can't hear you if you're trying to speak.
Ask her.
Miffy, if you maybe just leave and come back, or send the presentation to either me or Jess, we could share it on the screen while you talk through it.
Kia ora. Can you hear me now? Yep. Yes. Yeah, great. I will attempt to share my screen again.
For better quality, it might be best if maybe you just keep your video off. That might improve your internet quality a bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Is the presentation up now? Are we good? Good to go? Yep, great.
It's all up,
Okay,
Miffy. Off you go.
great. Thanks so much for that. Thanks for your patience. Okay, so we did bring a report to the committee in May last year. So that was the very start of the process, and we're now close to completing the policy development stage of the Waikato Regional Policy Statement Change 1. So I will give you a quick refresher of what it's all about. Okay, so the Waikato Regional Policy Statement, the RPS, needs to be amended to incorporate the requirements of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, the NPSUD, which was released in August 2020, and it did have a minor update in May of this year. The RPS also incorporates key components of the future-proof strategy, so it needs to be updated to reflect the recent changes to the strategy. The MPSUD requires Council to plan well for growth and to ensure well-functioning urban environments for all people, communities and future generations. So that well-functioning urban environments term is defined in MPS, and it includes the need to provide a variety of homes to meet the needs of different households, enable Māori to express their cultural norms and traditions, provide good accessibility, support reduction of greenhouse emissions and be resilient to current and future effects of climate change, which, as we're seeing, is becoming more and more important. So it only applies to districts which have an urban environment and has different requirements based on which tier a council is identified as. So Waikato and Waipa districts, Hamilton City and Waikato region are identified as Tier 1 local authorities, so have the most onerous requirements under that MPS. Rotorua Lakes is identified as Tier 1, however their urban environment is outside of the Waikato region, so it hasn't been included in this RPS change. Taupo, South Waikato and Matamata-Piako district councils meet the definition of Tier 3 local authorities as they have an urban environment in their districts. Other districts may become Tier 3 local authorities over time as they plan for growth. So the proposed changes to the RPS reflect these differing levels of MPSUD requirements, with more directive policies for the Tier 1 councils and the Tier 3 provision seeking to guide the Tier 3 councils how to implement the MPSUD in the Waikato context. So future-proof. If you're not familiar with future-proof, it is a 30-year sub-regional growth strategy for the Waikato, Waipa and Hamilton City council areas. These are the areas of higher growth. Matamata-Piako has now joined the future-proof partnership, and that'll be reflected in future versions of the strategy. So as you can see on the slide, the updated strategy has 7 transformational moves for change. I won't go through them all, but they're there for you to have a look at. So the strategy has been updated to reflect these core moves and to ensure it is consistent with the MPSUD. It sets the settlement pattern. There's a snapshot of the map there. Minimum density requirements and development principles, which will all be included in the RPS change. So this slide shows the process so far in the blue and the next couple of steps to get to notification of the plan change in green. So the consultation draft, which is attached to this report, has been through an independent peer review and a legal review to make sure it is giving effect to the MPSUD. Of note is that the draft is going to be converted to the National Planning Standards format, which is the government template for RMA plans. So it will look a little bit different when it's notified, but the content will be the same. And this is because of the whole of the RPS has been converted to this new format at the start of October. In terms of the actual changes to the RPS, we have deleted provisions relating to specific growth strategies prepared by territorial authorities outside of the future-proof sub-region, as these tended to go out of date quite quickly and that caused confusion. So they've been replaced with generic provisions to guide preparation of and give weight to growth strategies, and this works in with the requirements under the MPSUD for Tier 3. We've updated the provisions in the RPS that relate to the future-proof sub-region, and this is to reflect the updated future-proof strategy. So this includes the outcomes of the Hamilton to Auckland Corridor Plan, the Hamilton Waikato Metro Spatial Plan, the Metro Spatial Plan Transport Program Business Case, and the Three Waters Sub-Regional Study. There's also an acknowledgement in there that the Matamata-Piako district are now part of future-proof, and there's some transitional arrangements until they are included into the next strategy update. And there's finally these general changes that have been made throughout the RPS, and particularly Chapter 6, which is that built environment chapter, to make sure that overall the RPS is giving effect to the MPSUD. So there'll be these new definitions and some more cross-referencing and things like that throughout the document. Just of note, the RPS already has policies and methods requiring district councils to provide for marae and papakainga in their district plans, and those provisions aren't being changed, so they will still stand. And my final slide, this shows the next steps to go through the RMA Schedule 1 process. So we've got formal engagement before the end of the year. Then there'll be the hearing process held next year, and then hopefully we'll have some decisions later in the year, and then we'll see whether there are any appeals. So I've included a couple of the other processes that are going on at the same time in there, but because we recognise that there is a lot going on in this space at the moment. and we all have a lot to put our minds to. So that's my overview, and if you've got any questions or comments, I'm happy to take them, and hopefully the technology will continue to work for me.
Muffy, we're just having a quiet questioning ourselves around how does this particular mahi affect Ngāti Tahu, Ngāti Whawa, especially rural. That'd be nice to have an understanding around that, because Ngāti Tahu, Ngāti Whawa, ki ro tuara, they are rural. They might have a next door neighbour like Tūwhareto or Rotorua, but making sure that, you know, rural is considered all through this. And as for future proof, you're right. This doesn't mean a damn thing to Tarrant, because future proof doesn't go that far.
No.
What might affect them, if it ever does, is if they move into the area, at least they'll be up to date. But in saying that, enlighten us on how, and enlighten us on where we fit in this, Tarrant.
So the NPSUD does relate to urban environments. However, there are some requirements that if you are a Tier 3 territorial authority, then you have things that you have to do that apply across the whole of the district, such as removing all car parking minimums. So in the district plan, you can't require anyone to provide any car parks except for accessible ones. So that may have an impact on people in the Tarrant Rohi. There's also water quality is obviously something that needs to be considered with any sort of urban development. So in terms of water quality, the advice we have is that this change to the RPS in some way does impact on anyone within the Waikato River catchment. So while this won't have a lot of interest or impact on Tarrant, it is something that we believe that you should be aware of and have the opportunity to provide comment to.
So they sit in both then, you know, they're going to sit in Tier 2 because of lakes and also taupo, you know, so how does that work? If you're saying Tier 3 and new urban development is not, they don't have to supply car parks or whatever, how does the boundary line work between Tier 2 and Tier 3? Is it the boundary line of that particular council? For instance, I mean, you know, you got Tarrant, Riparo, for instance, who might have both. Then you've got, of course, Ki Oro Tuara, who is just Rotorua.
So it is the boundaries of the territorial authorities. So, yeah. So some of the policies do just apply to those urban environments. So those are the settlements that are greater than 10,000 in population or have a labour market of that size. But then, yeah, there are those policies like the car parking that go across the whole of the district.
So when you talk urban, then what happens to, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but what happens to marae that want to build a car park and they come under Tier 2 or Tier 3 where it's not part and parcel of that? What happens there? It's no different than a hall.
So the rules, they don't stop people from putting in car parks. It just says the council can't make you put in car parks. So you can't have a rule in your plan that says you have to provide this many car parks for this amount of floor space or this number of bedrooms. So it's up to whoever's doing the development to decide whether to provide car parks and how many.
Okay. What that sounds like is, it doesn't make sense, but hey, you know, if you've got a big, huge company that's going to build in the middle of town, for instance, and they're saying, oh, we don't have to do car parks, and the damn street won't cater for a car, because it's already filled up with the cars going up and down the road. How does that work, Miffy?
We're not sure that it's so. It is a policy that this national policy statement applies across the country. I imagine the Ministry for Environment were thinking that this would encourage people to use public transport or other modes of transport, but that only works if it's available. So it has been applied as a blanket rule for anyone that qualifies as one of those tiered councils. And saying that the market will still, in most places, dictate that a car park on site is required because that is what people will choose. However, the council cannot make people provide them.
Okay, Kathy.
So, so personally, I think that thing about the car parks is ridiculous. But I guess my question is related to, in places that aren't Hamilton or major centres, where actually people rely on their cars quite a lot because we don't have as extensive public transport system. Surely that's going to create problems if we just leave it up to property developers to decide whether they put car parks in.
Potentially, yes, that has been raised with the Ministry for the Environment, but that is the policy as it stands. That's the national direction that we have to comply with.
So do you think that their rationale for it is simply that they want to reduce the numbers of people driving cars?
Yes, I believe so.
But that doesn't make sense in the provinces. I mean, that's just ridiculous because we don't all have public transport that can, for instance, someone from Turangi, they don't have any public transport at all. They don't have a single bit of public transport. I'm just thinking it's really ridiculous. And anyway, yeah.
Election next year, so.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if you have any other comments to make, Miffy.
Stu, is this about this ticket?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kia ora, Miffy, Stu Kneebone here. Hey, you might not be able to answer this, but do you have any feeling yet with regards to, say, Cambridge and Hamilton, and whether or not the limitations of their three waters infrastructure is likely to put a bit of a dampener on developers making the most of this new intensification rule? And I guess not want to be too political, but obviously the current or the national government are making noises about potentially revisiting this. Are you able to comment on that at all?
Before you do, Muffy, how's that going to help Tara?
Well, if you listen, you might find out, please.
Okay,
but because it's going to impact on Rotorua as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Muffy.
So with the Waikato River catchment, we in submitting on that amendment to the RMA that brought in the medium density residential standards, we did get Te Ture Whaimana as a qualifying matter. So that means that we are able to consider water and infrastructure that supports water quality as a limiting factor for where you can increase have that intensification. So given that we've had a relatively short period of time to prepare for these plan changes going live, because they were due by the 20th of August and we are actually running slightly behind. But both Hamilton and Waipa have identified that as a qualifying matter within their plan changes, and it will limit where those the intensification can happen.
Yeah,
so
I imagine the same thing would apply in Rotorua as well. I have no idea what the status of their three waters infrastructure is like.
Yeah, so it's Te Ture Whaimana that is enabling us to use that. So that obviously only applies to the catchment. So it would only be within the Waikato River catchment that can be applied.
But even in catchments where Te Ture Whaimana doesn't apply, surely that there's going to be targets and limits set in place for the receiving environments of discharges from the likes of Rotorua too, one would imagine.
So the qualifying matters are quite specific.
Okay.
So they're sort of based around Part 6 matters of the RMA. So I'm not sure that there is the ability for anyone else to use water and water infrastructure as a qualifying matter outside our catchment.
Okay. No, thank you for clarifying that. Cheers.
Thank you, Miffy. The next few pages from from page 45 onwards is really quite extensive. So I'm not going to even presume that the group has read it word for word, but you don't even have much time to summarize what it is. So when if you do, and if at any, do you want feedback from Tarot on this these pages, Miffy?
So we did send an email out, I think 3.5 weeks ago with this.
Okay.
And so there is time to comment on it until the end of this week. And then there will be time, once it's notified, there's going to be a 2-month period for us to get further comments.
Okay, without doing it today. Evelyn.
Oh, look, thank you. It is, but as you are well aware, we've been inundated with a number of reforms, and unfortunately, if it did not directly impact us or the Waikato River, it got shoved back to the bottom of the pile. My apologies, but I'm just being open and frank here because we've had a number that we've had to, submissions that we've had and deadlines that we've had to meet, and we've just had to prioritise, and that's the reality of the mahi that's or the changes that we're facing at this particular time. So it's not saying that it's not important, but if it if it didn't impact us directly, and I'm not saying that the team have not made attempts to make a submission. I'm not quite sure, but thank you if you don't receive anything from us. And
yeah,
hey,
and saying that though, Miffy, if you do believe there's some areas that might impact on Tarot, it might be great for you to highlight that in particular if you want to send it back, because it's important that the communication doesn't stop and we keep continuing with it, because communication is important.
Well, look, thank you, Katarina. What you've done is you've reminded me. I have a note here on the front page, and it says 1-page executive summary. So I think wrapping up what Katarina was saying, it would have been actually probably helpful to us if we could have, and it's more in the board pack. But I think it's also, within those communications that we, if it's not obvious, if it perhaps isn't obvious, that we could have a 1-page exec summary as to some of the changes and what might impact Te Arawa River Iwi Trust. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Miffy, that's you. Thank you.
Kia ora.
So Koto comes to our end. And before we close and get a karakia on behalf of Waikato Regional Council, it's always a pleasure to see our iwi at the table. And this is, it may not be quite the space where we get to discuss everything we want to, but at least it brings us all to the table and have some discussion. So in saying that, as for the next terms, I don't know who might be on these boards going forward, but that's not talking about the iwi, I'm talking about the council. We don't know who's who in the zoo until September, I think, till October the 12th. So, let's just have our fingers crossed and see who it is and how it all works. And in between now and then, if I don't see any of you around the table, hey, good luck. But you know where I am. Up until then, Tipper and I are still councillors. So congratulations. Yeah, well, we're not going to run the whole of WRC by ourselves, even though I'm sure we could. Anyway, recommendations. So let me quickly check and see if any of these need to be done individually. B, Co-Governance Committee recommend council notify. Are you happy with that? Are you happy with these recommendations? Okay, so can I have someone move our recommendations? We're going to move the whole sheet together. I think Tarrant and WRC is happy with the whole lot. Yep. Ka pai tēnā. We've got a mover. One is Perry and the other one, second is Stu. So thank you again. And who's going to close?
Right, we'll close together.
Okay, ka pai tēnā. Okay, so kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te ata whai o tō tātou arakia ihu karaiti, me te arawa o te atua, me te whiwhina taitanga, wairua tapu, ake. Mene. I do believe lunch is here, and it should be out these doors and turn left in the tui room, I think. So, stay for lunch. Here you go.